Thomas Jefferson, my hero. Third President of the United States, scientist, writer of the Declaration of Independence. He loved connecting. So at his home in Monticello, he held dinners that were scintillating. He was able to invite anyone in the world, and they showed. He had discussions under candlelight that created our country. So we took that idea when I was chairman of Monticello, and we said, let's hold more and more of those as if you're at Mr. Jefferson's table. We started running Jeffersonian dinners. People came. So we said, let's do those dinners, not just for Monticello, let's do them for a lot of other topics around the world. So we started running them in Senegal, talking about global health, in London, talking about anti-poverty initiatives, in New York, focusing on innovation and education, and in New Orleans, talking about music and bringing it back to kids across America. So he said, let's take that dinner format and start replicating it. And it's happened hundreds of times. So for any dinner, you need a recipe. And the first thing in the recipe for the Jeffersonian dinners is 12 to 15 people at a table. You add a common interest, education, global health, music, could be anything. But the deal is that instead of the individual discussions that most of us have at our dinners, I hate 1,000-person dinners where you walk in, do small talk, hear 3 speeches, and then walk out and said, I wasted an evening. This isn't the deal. You go have whole table discussions. The rule is that you cannot talk to the person next to you. You talk to the entire table. The entire table listens. You have one conversation. You have a one-mind conversation. You generate better ideas when you do that. So then you add to it the public narrative strategy developed by Marshall Gans at Kennedy School at Harvard, social organizing technique, and he focuses on me, us, and we. So the me part of it is that you can focus on the story of self, the story of connecting to yourself and connecting to others. And so you open up with an opening question. For 2 minutes each, you go around the table, and we had a dinner on innovation and education, and the opening question was, who's your favorite teacher? And we told the people ahead of time that that's going to be the question. People sweated for days thinking about, who is my favorite teacher? And they told amazing stories. And so you go around the table and you're connected already in the beginning. Then you mix and you moderate. So you mix the conversation by taking it from the personal to the us. The us is, what do we have in common? How do we connect? And so we talked about, in the education example, how do you bring teachers technology to help them? How do you make them so that they stay longer in job? What is the best teacher? So you talk about that. You mix, and you have to moderate. You have to have somebody saying, that person's talking too long. Let's move it around. Let's make sure the discussion goes. And then you stop 15 minutes before the dinner is over, and then you take a pulse around the table. So how are we doing? Are we connecting? What would you like to follow up on? Who would you like to follow up with? We've done this in hundreds of nonprofits and raised hundreds of millions of dollars in connections because people came to these, they got connected to the idea, passionately connected to the concept, felt like they could add value to that nonprofit as opposed to just dumping money in it. We do it around ideas and problems that aren't even related to a nonprofit. I've done it at University of Virginia last week. We had 6 of them, where we had dinners with Board of Visitors, with alums, with donors, and each one had an individual topic, and they all came back out with action plans for what to do next, what they'd like to do next, each individually connected to the passion.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is a pleasure that you volunteered to come and join us for a dinner where really the dinner is in the center, but equally the conversation that we should have with the dinner. We would like to find out really personal stories, because it's usually through a personal story that we get to a point that really has an aha moment. And so what I thought we would do then tonight is we start with each one of us giving us a 2-minute idea of telling us about a physician that impacted you, one way or the other, positively or negatively, so that we know how really physicians impact us in our daily lives or in the lives going forward. Kate?
Well, I have a great story that I feel impacted me a great deal. However, it's kind of a downer of a story. The doctor was my OBGYN. He was not a warm and friendly person. He was not at all helpful to me. But that day, he changed me around. I lost my baby, but he turned to me and he said, "You can get through this." I said to him, "Cut it out of me." And he said, "No, you will take it together, you will be together, and you will get through this doing it your way, and you will have a natural birth." It took me the whole day, and he stayed with me. He held me, he talked me through it all, as was my husband there. And it was a rough experience, but he made me see something of myself that I never knew I could do. And he got me through that day. And I'll never forget that man. And that's the story.
Wow. Thank you. Laura?
Great. Well, my story actually has to do with our son. About 3 years ago, he had what we didn't realize was his first seizure. We ended up with a pediatrologist immediately, and they were asking about, do we have a family history of drinking and all these things. And I remember looking at him and how the doctors create the anxiety when they talk in a very clinical sense to us. And then we ended up going to a doctor. He's European, and this means something, part of my story. He's very much less about the medical and much more about the patient. And he could sense that my son was nervous. He could sense that we had completely overreacted to what was happening. And the doctor immediately knew this wasn't about a kid that was severely sick. This was about a family that was completely overreacting to what was happening. And he said, "You're all acting crazy," essentially. And into our face, he looked at us and said, "If you don't change what you're doing, he will grow up and shoot people." Mm. That's what a European doctor does. Somebody outside of our culture who says it straight. Mm. So to me, a little bit of this story is we spend an inordinate amount of time on the medical, and ultimately we're human beings. It's not about necessarily saving the person, it's about the quality of life and the mental state that they're in. And if it weren't for this doctor in the Bronx, our family would still be in disarray. Now we sort of live as good a life as we all could live because of somebody who was just told it to us straight. So that's my story.
I want to thank all of you for incredible stories, right? Are we ready to have some more to eat? I think we need to kind of fortify ourselves.
I beg of you.
All right, thank you. I think this was a fascinating coming together of getting real personal stories, and it clearly shows how important the personal connection is that we have with our physicians. So now let's just go a little bit forward and see what comes as a basis, how we can change the system so that we can assure that we can make better physicians. So that's, I think, the topic.
I took away one thing that I thought was a theme from everybody's story, whether they were the good or the bad. There's IQ and EQ, and it seemed to me at least that EQ in every story really played a heavy role. The eye contact, the ability to draw strength out of somebody that they didn't know existed, the ability to calm a family. All of our stories, the EQ part of it, which is really hard to teach. It's something typically you're born with, but to only teach the IQ piece and the technical piece, I felt like that was a part of what worked was when someone had the EQ side of it.
I'd go back to the vocation versus a job thing. And I think, to me, and all the medical issues I've had in my whole life, starting when I was 10 years old, with the doctor showing me at my house, that's a vocation. You don't show up at somebody's house with a bag at 2 o'clock in the morning if you just got a job. You just don't do that. That's not who you are. That's not what your life is like. So how can we help the medical schools separate the wheat from the chaff in that respect? To me, that would be a question that I'd like to see answered.
What are the things that we need to look on your application and say, yeah, this is a vocation rather than just a job, as you said? Okay? Oh, sorry?
I just wonder if maybe you don't have to upend the entire system of the way that you screen for people or develop physicians, but maybe there are some who just have a natural gift for human interaction. They have a empathetic quality, and there are others who don't, and maybe those physicians who display that talent, they would be on the front lines dealing and interacting with patients, and then you have a subset of doctors who are clinicians who would analyze data.
All those things that we assumed in our generation, the EQ, the ethics, because we all thought we had it, is literally thrown up in the air, and we have to investigate each one of them. And we have to come up forward and decide, oh, what is the right thing to do? And so we have to have space for ethicists. We have to have space for empathists. And I think, again, the Dalai Lama really said it really nice. Compassion is empathy plus action. And so we have to teach our students what's empathy and how to act. So, in a way, this now is the action item that perhaps we can do after dinner and perhaps at dessert. How's that?
Speaking of dinner.
All right, thank you. Let me wrap it up, and we started out with a personal story. I'd like to go around and ask each one what you thought about the evening, how it went, and what you took away from it personally, just this kind of dinner and how that kind of resonated or didn't resonate with you.
Yeah, it was interesting from your perspective to peer behind the green magic curtain and see what a doctor is feeling. Often times we go in with an ailment or needing something, and we don't realize that there's someone on the other side trying to improve the whole process as a patient as well. So that was an interesting look, and I thank you for that.
Okay.
I thought the dinner was wonderful. I agree with everything you all said. I found Kate's story to be the most touching to me. And the part about it, which I hadn't really thought about, was a doctor bringing something out of you that you didn't know was there as strength. And I always have this bias that people have a will to live, a will to get better, a will to recover. But I never really thought, to Gary's point about the doctor side of that and what their role in that could be. And everyone touched on how the doctor affected them. Yours really, at least for me, brought it home that at that worst moment, somebody you least expected to help you, not only helped you get through it, but helped you find something in yourself that you didn't know existed. And it really shows the power that a physician or a doctor could have on us, not just on our well-being.
Right.
We're not doing enough of this as Americans. We're just not doing enough of this. We're not listening, we're not sitting down and let's talk it out, one subject at a time. And I think that the more you do this, the better off medicine is going to be.
It speaks to the soul. It speaks that it doesn't matter where you come from, there is this common ground. And then you don't have to be an expert in it. As a group, we came out as experts, if you look at it. And that kind of gives me a little more wind to be better tomorrow when I speak to our medical students, when I speak to patients, when I speak to colleagues, but more, you will do the same thing at your jobs. And so I think it fulfilled its need, in that regard, but more that we are stimulated, and I want to thank everyone for this, and let's have a good dessert now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's for dessert?
So I guess